Hello friends, welcome once again to another session on the abundant life. In my last talk, we examined some of the symptoms of depression. And just to refresh your memory, here are the symptoms we discussed: disturbed sleep, eating habits, physical maladies, remembering difficulties, emotional excesses, sloppy appearance, sadness, interest lost in living, outbursts of emotion, and no hope in life. Well, today we shall discuss some of the causes of depression. And at the very outset, I would like to remind you that I have taken matter from two books which I named the last time. I have also added some anecdotes and experiences I have had in my own life, as well as in the lives of family and friends. There is probably no single cause or reason for depression. Rather, it's true to point out that it occurs whenever a number of individual factors converge, leaving a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness in the person when he feels unable to manage or handle the situation. Such factors could include too much work or stress and too little rest or free time, either at the workplace or in the family. The person may be excessively sensitive and experience too much loneliness when his need for genuine intimacy is not met. The factors may be categorized as psychological, but many a time depression may have physical causes. So, let us examine these causes, some of them at least, one at a time. The first is disappointment. It is perhaps the most common cause of depression because, you will agree with me, there is no one who does not face disappointment in big or small ways at various points in his or her life. And one of the most prevalent sources of disappointment in life is people. People you live with through their thoughtless words and actions are indeed a major cause of depression. Hence, it is perfectly true to say that every one of us feels disappointed and therefore depressed with different people at different times. Mind you, this is perfectly normal, but it becomes a cause for worry if it is prolonged and leads to a disturbed lifestyle. For example, disappointment in love or marriage leading to breakups and divorce can lead to depression. Why? Because you had a rosy picture of love and things did not turn out according to your rosy picture. Yes, indeed, life is not a bed of roses. We spoke of people causing depression. Again, depression may result from certain situations. Let's take an example. You want something badly. For example, there is a job promotion available and it does not happen to you. So you feel frustrated and let down. You know you are capable and worthy of the promotion, but someone else bribes his way into the promotion. Your discouragement leads to disillusionment with the company setup or the management. This leads to anger and rage in you, but you have no higher authority or legal recourse to turn to. Your anger has no place to go except inward into your very soul and very soon surfaces as depression. Let's look at another factor, another cause, equivocation. This term generally has a negative connotation, but one common meaning of it is to be undecided about your response to a person, a thing, or an event. Let's take an example. A new daughter-in-law is forced to cook a new dish every day by her mother-in-law. The daughter-in-law feels angry about this and feels upset. But when her husband asks her about it, she simply says, "Oh, it's nothing." Or she may give a false reason, such as, "I have a headache." Why does she do so? Because she doesn't know how her husband will react or whether he will accept her comments about his mother. The question then is, for how long will she go on lying? If this type of situation is unresolved and the need to equivocate goes on frequently, it may lead to ambivalent feelings in her, whereby she feels trapped in this situation and where she feels it necessary to avoid speaking the truth. Such ambivalence often leads to grief that is unresolved, hidden, or unexpressed. There is a dull emotional pain inside the person that changes into something acute and overpowering, and in time may result in anger or rage, which ultimately converts to depression. Let's look at another cause, physical and biological factors and malfunctions. In America, about 10 to 15% of depression cases are because of some physical or biological malfunction. This may be equally true in India. Hypoglycemia is one such physical malfunction. What does it mean? It means that there is an abnormal decrease in sugar in the blood. Therefore, hypoglycemic patients should follow a strict eating program. Too long a gap without eating food makes the blood sugar drop so low as to trigger an emotional low, ending up in depression. Again, biological or glandular malfunctions may trigger depression, for example, in those suffering from abnormal thyroid glands. Another case is postpartum depression. This is depression experienced by mothers shortly after the child's birth due to emotional exhaustion that follows the birth of the child. Such mothers experience a constant drain on their energy and begin to feel irritated at the demands of the baby, or even do not want to share the affections of the husband with the baby. Obviously, the husband wants to focus his attention on the child as well. Now, usually, this postpartum depression does not linger for too long and passes away without causing much damage to the mother. We've often heard of family history being taken into account in persons showing symptoms of diabetes, heart problems, cancer, etc. The same may be true of depression, where one's family history may be linked with depression. For instance, if a parent or grandparent suffers from prolonged depression, future generations may also suffer from it. Let's look at another cause, rejection. Every human being needs love, affection, and attention. When this need is not met, it may result in depression. In fact, the greatest source of discouragement is the rejection of someone you love. For example, a jilted lover soon experiences depression, and if that person jilted is a girl, she may even entertain suicidal thoughts. Then again, a child who has been told in a fit of anger by the parent or other family members like grandparents that he is not loved or was the result of an unplanned or unwanted pregnancy, this child becomes a likely subject for depression. Mind you, even if it is not said verbally by the parents, the child reads the body language of the parents and may suspect that the parents do not love him and therefore may get depressed. Hence, the need to reassure the child of your love, especially in his growing up years. Some teenagers experience tremendous fear of rejection by their peers who make fun of them, and so they experience depression. Husbands and wives who sense a loss of love and therefore feel rejected by their spouses may experience depression. And do you know what happens? This is often the cause of adulterous and extramarital relationships. What about friends? Persons who feel betrayed by their trusted friends may also experience depression. What about death? Many spouses whose partners have been snatched away from them in death experience tremendous loneliness, which, if not properly channeled into something useful and meaningful, may lead to depression. Let's look at another factor, esteem and image issues. In an earlier session, I gave a couple of talks on self-image and self-esteem. So here, I will highlight only a few significant points without going into details. Many persons are insecure and are unable to accept themselves. They have a poor self-image and experience a lack of self-esteem. This may be when they have unrealistic expectations of themselves and therefore are incapable of self-approval. Many experience self-rejection. They say things like, I am no good, I cannot do such and such a thing, please ask somebody else, etc. At other times, there may have been unrealistic demands on them on the part of excessively critical parents and other family members who expect the child to shine all the time. Likewise, teachers and peers also have a role to play in this. Thus, each of us grows up with and is controlled by the mental picture we develop of ourselves, which may be good or bad, positive or negative. This self-image affects our behavior, attitudes, productivity, and ultimately our success in life. The negative mental picture of ourselves, if harbored for too long, may lead to depression. Here's another cause, sickness. Prolonged periods of illness can make a person vulnerable to depression. For instance, when a person is weakened by illness, things that are ordinarily not bothersome tend to get unduly magnified, and the person may easily drift into self-pity and therefore into depression. Patients who have recovered from infectious hepatitis are left with very little energy, which makes them exposed to depression. Those having Parkinson's disease, which causes a person's limbs to shake and become uncontrollable, usually end up with depression. I remember one of my own teachers who, used to cry bitterly because he could not move freely, whereas all along he was very, very active. What about drugs? Some drugs prescribed may have side effects. For example, a drug for blood pressure, while it is effective in that area, may simultaneously precipitate clinical depression. What about tranquilizers? Some tranquilizers given to induce sleep in those suffering from insomnia or patients who cannot sleep because of pain after surgery. Such tranquilizers may precipitate depression. Some reports suggest that regular use of oral contraceptive drugs tends to facilitate depression. Let's look at another factor, self-pity, coupled with comparisons with others. This can do great harm. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5, we are advised to be content with what we have. But sadly, many of us, including myself, indulge in self-pity over our poor state, our poor condition. We bitterly complain about what we lack by comparing ourselves with our neighbors and others. I am reminded of a wonderful bumper sticker which says, "I grumbled because I did not have new shoes till I saw someone who had no feet." Yes, friends, instead of counting our God-given blessings, we are jealous and envious of our neighbors' property, possessions, popularity, talents, looks, etc. Let us recall King Ahab's longing for Naboth's vineyard in 1 Kings 21 and following, and how he went into depression because Naboth was not prepared to sell his family property. I won't tell you the story. Please read this interesting story in the Bible. Thus, every time we compare ourselves with others, what are we doing? We are insulting God, who has given us so much. We think of others as better than ourselves. The truth is, they themselves may be envying us. Therefore, discontent with what you have and are as a person will certainly generate depression. Let's look at another cause. Inadequate goals or preparation for the future. It has been observed that goal-conscious persons are rarely depressed. They finish one project, but already have a couple of future tasks set out and ready for attack. Let me give you my example. While I am engaged in preparing for a given talk on CCR TV, I already have 2 or 3 other talks lined up. So, as and when some pertinent points and examples present themselves for these 2 or 3 other topics, I am already ready to jot them down in my diary, which I keep by my table, one point at a time. And this goes on simultaneously with my preparation for the talk in hand. That perhaps explains why an idle mind is fertile ground for depression. One should never indulge in a mental vacuum. Why? Because it becomes the devil's workshop. Our youth who have no jobs or goals in life may end up with depressive and or suicidal tendencies. What about those who are due to retire from active service? Sometimes they face boredom and purposelessness if they have not planned for the future, and you can guess what the result is in their case. I am so grateful that almost soon after I finished my work and in the college, I was invited by CCR TV to give talks, and I am ever grateful because it keeps me mentally alert, and as I jokingly say, it keeps many of my old age problems at bay. Let's look at another cause. Being overworked, the overworked syndrome, or hyper mental activity. You will agree with me that in the modern world, the lifestyle of people is so cluttered and stressed out with details of jobs to be undertaken, deadlines to be met, chores to be completed, and so on, that it becomes difficult for individuals to rest, not only physically, but also mentally. Their powers of concentration seem to diminish, and normally calm or peaceful persons react with annoyance, irritability, and frustration vis-a-vis situations that they could once easily cope with. And it often happens in their own families, where they shout and scream at their children. The intense mental activity and stress of the person gives inadequate rest to the brain, which then goes into depression sooner or later. The final point I want to talk about is where you have no God and no faith, there is a void. Self-made and self-oriented persons may be successful in life up to a point. But what happens when tragedy strikes? If there is no God in their lives and no faith-backed support system from their community, then things just fall apart for them, and they are unable to cope, with the result that they may go into depression and become even suicidal. Hence the need for God and a sound faith in our lives. So friends, what have we seen today? Let us summarize it as follows. D, disappointment. E, equivocation. P, physical or biological malfunctions. R, rejection. E, esteem issues. S, sickness. S, self-pity. I, inadequate goals. O, overworked. And N, no faith, no God. And if you look at it vertically, what do you get? D-E-P-R-E-S-S-I-O-N. Next week, or whenever possible, we shall discuss the remedies for feelings of depression. Meanwhile, I want to remind you, please once again do not jump to conclusions over the points I have discussed with you. If at all you need help, go to a counselor or a psychiatrist, but don't begin judging one another because I have given you some points. I have given it to you from books. I am no counselor myself. So I wish you good luck in all that you have to do with your family and friends. Pray and keep God at all times and your faith alive to keep depression at bay. God bless you.